Thank you, ma'am. I'm grateful.
Now, speaking of airlines, the Kenyan lawmakers will investigate the national airline for turning down a request by Uganda's president to fly him to Nairobi. The investigation was needed because of the potential embarrassment to the country. Kenya Airways declined a request by President Yoweri Museveni to pick him up from his hometown in western Uganda on the 20th of February. The airline has said the incident was regrettable, and Mr. Museveni then flew to the regional heads of states meeting hosted by Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta on an Ethiopian Airlines flight. Mr. Gathenji said he was not aware of an official complaint against the airline just yet. However, Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee, which he chairs, would investigate the incident as it was part of its mandate to try and understand anything that could potentially embarrass the government or damage relations with friendly nations. Now, dozens of families fled Libya's coastal city of Sirte just yesterday after 2 days of clashes between the Islamic State militants and fighters loyal to a government based in Tripoli, with violence likely to escalate. Witnesses reported families packed into cars and headed west toward Misrata, stronghold of the Libya Dawn armed group, which backs the self-declared government in the capital Tripoli, and some 20 cars were evacuated staff from a hospital. Now, what we're hearing from media institutions there is that Islamic State militants had kidnapped foreign medical staff in Sirte. However, that's not been confirmed just yet. Now, 2 Serbian nurses traveling with a Bulgarian colleague said they did see ISIS fighters as they left Sirte, but the men had not stopped them when they were trying to. The region east of Sirte has been a battlefield since December, when Libya Dawn tried to seize Libya's biggest oil ports, and they are held by forces loyal to the internationally recognized government of Prime Minister Abdullah Al-Tini, based in the east. On Thursday last week, the former First Lady, Simone Gbagbo, was sentenced to 20 years in jail for her role in the 2011 post-election crisis in which around 3,000 people were killed. That's a ruling that has divided victims of the post-election violence. Now, some of those victims, like Mohamed Kony, have been recounting their experiences and the side effects which they suffered, and you'll see those in this next report.
Just 4 years ago, Yopougon was one of the many neighborhoods that were at the epicenter of a post-election conflict that killed more than 3,000 people and drove more than 1 million from their homes. This week, former Ivory Coast First Lady Simone Gbagbo was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in the 2011 post-election crisis, a case that has reopened divisions in a nation still recovering from years of political turmoil and conflict. 25-year-old Mohamed Kony is amongst those living with the emotional and physical scars of the conflict. Kony was shot in the neck by a soldier and as a result became paralyzed from the neck down. The former mechanic, now unable to move by himself, needs 24-hour care. Despite his physical limitations, Kony hopes that the verdict can further encourage reconciliation in his country.
If the court have decided to convict them, then that's a win for victims like me and those who are paralyzed like me. We are happy about the verdict. I am really pleased about the outcome.
Although some have welcomed the verdict, many of the victims, like Kony, say they feel neglected by the current government.
I can't do anything by myself without the help of someone. My parents are forced to stay with me day and night. They cannot forgive because the government has put some people in jail. That's something that affects us. You can't go on ignoring people's rights without justice. If justice has been done,
Kony's parents are also still struggling to come to terms with the aftermath of the conflict, and for them, reconciliation is a hard sell. Ethnic identity and disputes over who should be considered Ivorian were at the root of a decade of political turmoil that ended in 2011 with a brief post-election civil war. Ivory Coast is due to hold elections in October and has rebounded swiftly since the conflict, but critics argue that none of the pro-Ouattara supporters involved in the conflict have been brought to justice.
We'll take a break now, Network Africa. When we come back, we'll be speaking to the Voice of America's Heather Murdoch concerning the sentencing of Mohamed Badia. Please stay with us.